I'm now very pleased to be able to introduce Dr. Nasser Rabbat, Director of the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture and co-curator of Syria, A Living History.
Good evening, everyone. How to represent Syria? Something that has occupied me for the last 40 years, both as born and raised in Syria, citizen of Syria, before coming to the US, but also as a professional, as an architectural historian, as a historian, as someone who actually cares about telling the story of Syria. This became much more urgent with the war and the destruction of the last 5 years, or a bit more than 5 years now. So I jumped on the opportunity when Henry, who is actually an amazing schemer, I have to tell you, called me while I was on sabbatical in Paris and said, I would like to take you out to dinner. He knew that that was a winning proposition. And then he said, we're going to do a show about Syria. Would you like to work with us on that? And I said, yes. I had no idea what my role was going to be. But then when he teamed me up with Phyllis, who's actually the real engine behind the show, she basically allowed my imagination about representing Syria to flow. But she's the one that sort of like put the objects to sort of like anchor it on the ground and to say, if we are going to imagine Syria this way or to represent Syria this way, these are the objects that we need to look at. We came up with the thematic division based on the notion that a country that is as rich as Syria, artistically, culturally, historically, religiously, intellectually, cannot be just represented as sort of like a chronology of events and cultures. We need to sort of like somehow insert it in our notion of culture in general. So these 5 or 6 divisions are to say that how do we distill out of culture themes that could be represented artistically? And this is what we came up with. Of course, we were governed by the objects that we had. We could perhaps actually have come up with other themes. But we're very satisfied with the way it turned out. And the way, even though it is not very clear from the beginning that this is what you are confronted with when you come into the show, but in fact, you are there looking at the notion of culture as represented by the history of one particularly rich and particularly interculturally constructed country. Syria, the Syria that I grew up in and thought about, is actually not the Syria that we hear about in the news today. It is the Syria of all of these cultures living together, producing together. It is the country that has maintained for all of these centuries the residues of the cultures and the religions and the ways of life of all the people and of all the cultures that have intersected on its soil. That's why we have religions in Syria, and I'm saying religions in the plural, that do not exist anywhere else. 2 of them actually can be traced to pre-monotheistic religions. They're surviving today in an environment that has been totally monotheized, turned into a monotheistic environment. So we wanted this show to tell the world that this is a part of the world that in its history, in its artistic history, reflects the intersection of all the cultures around the Mediterranean and in Asia and in Arabia that have come together, sometimes violently, sometimes peacefully, but have left all the traces on the soil of the country that we would like this show again to distill out of that story. And we hope that you will be able to read that story as you turn and look at the show itself. Thank you.